Examining this film in greater detail will reveal several unexpected errors that were included in the final version. Perfection itself has its peculiarities. 20. Maria didn't know how to play the guitar. Julie Andrews. Prior to filming, she had no prior guitar playing expertise, despite being well known for her performance as Maria in The Sound of Music. She needed to learn the fundamentals before she could do her singing and guitar parts. She found it quite difficult to sing and play the guitar simultaneously, though. With the cameras rolling, it was particularly difficult to manage. Before recording some of the guitar sequences, she would occasionally take a little sip of Austrian schnapps, a potent alcoholic beverage, to help her relax and feel more at ease. Christopher Plummer, who played Captain Von Trapp, also studied singing and guitar to get ready for the role. Despite his rehearsal, however, his real singing and guitar playing were not included in the finished film. Rather, they had a professional guitarist and singer re-record certain sections. Instead, their voices were used in the movie. Number 19. In real life, Kim Carrath was unable to swim. Something genuinely terrifying occurs in real life at the scene where the Von Trapp family is in a rowboat and it flips over. The youngest child, Gretel, was played by Kim Carrath, a little girl who was not proficient in swimming. The boat capsized, and everyone went down in the water. Gretel was intended to be rescued from the water by Julie Andrews, who played Maria. However, Julie was unable to reach Gretel in time when the boat capsized because she lost her balance and slid backward. Kim Carrath ultimately swallowed a lot of water as a result of this. Unfortunately, it made her ill, and she ended up throwing up. Exactly like Heather Menzies, who portrayed one of the elder girls, Louisa. Fortunately, Kim was well afterwards, but the scene during filming was extremely frightening. Christopher Plummer, number 18, didn't like working on the movie. Actor Christopher Plummer, who portrayed Captain Von Trapp, didn't particularly enjoy working on the soundtrack. He felt that the film was too romantic or sweet for his taste. Instead of calling it The Sound of Music, he even came up with humorous nicknames for it, such as That Movie, S&M, or The Sound of Mucus. In order to deal with his unhappiness during filming, he spent a lot of time eating and drinking. He acquired a significant amount of weight throughout the shoot as a result. He actually acquired so much weight that his clothes had to be altered and resized to accommodate his larger frame. Despite his criticism of the film at the time, he later acknowledged that he appreciated how well liked it was. The second unanticipated mishap that was featured in the film is this one. 17th. The movie didn't use the Von Trapp family's authentic home. The Von Trapp family's real home, which is not the one seen in the film, is still standing. In reality, the big home in the movie is a fusion of two different structures. The front was displayed using one, and the back was displayed using another. The house in which the interior sequences were shot was not a real one. They were filmed on Hollywood-made special sets. Nor was the famous gazebo where the song 16 Going on 17 was filmed. For the movie, it was built specifically. Later on, it underwent 2 relocations. The fans may now see it at Hellbrunn Palace in Salzburg, Austria. The movie was not shot at Nonnberg Abbey, where Maria lived as a nun, and neither was the courtyard. Many people still believe that those sequences were filmed at the actual spot because of the authenticity of the reproduction created by designer Boris Levin, which included details like the windows and stones. Last but not least, Austria was not used to film the scene in which the Von Trapp family hides from the Nazis in a cemetery. Although some tour guides in Salzburg still maintain that the scene was filmed on the Fox movie lot in Hollywood, the entire scenario was really recorded on a studio set constructed on the property. 16. Edelweiss was not an Australian hit tune. You might think that the song Edelweiss is the national anthem of Austria or possibly a traditional folk music from Austria. However, it's not. Actually, it was written for the Broadway production of The Sound of Music in the United States. Renowned songwriting pair Rodgers and Hammerstein wrote all of the show's Austrian-inspired music. Their last song together was called Edelweiss. Just 9 months after The Sound of Music made its stage debut, Oscar Hammerstein tragically passed away in 1960. Edelweiss grew so popular that many people around the world believed it to be a part of Austria's culture or legacy, despite the fact that it is not a real Austrian song. On the 15th, Maria gave up her rights to the movie. A German producer in 1956 wished to adapt Maria von Trapp's book into a motion picture. In exchange for the rights to her narrative, he gave her $10,000. Maria asked whether she would be eligible to share in the movie's earnings as well. But the producer told her that it was illegal for film studios in Germany to give persons who were not German citizens royalties, which are extra money made from sales. Maria was already an American citizen at that point. Unaware that she was giving up all the film rights to her lifetale, Maria signed the contract because she trusted him. A few weeks later, the producer came back to offer her $9,000 in cash if she agreed right away. The Von Trapp family considered this to be a substantial amount. Considering that they had never made so much money singing, she took the offer. Maria then learned that the producer had lied to her. Such a law did not exist in Germany. She was duped by him. For very little money, they were able to take full control of her story. Despite the injustice done to Maria and her family, the Von Trapps received a small portion of the profits from the play and movie from Rodgers and Hammerstein, the authors of The Sound of Music. Although it was not required of them, they did so out of kindness. It was, however, a small portion of what the Von Trapps could have earned had they kept the rights. That being said, Maria had no grudge. Later stated that the play and film's positive impact on people worldwide was far more valuable than its financial value. Maria, number 14, was employed to instruct just one youngster. Maria Von Trapp did not start out as a governess for all 7 children, as the film portrays. In actuality, she joined the ship in 1926 to teach a single youngster. A former naval captain called George Von Trapp's daughter, Maria, was gravely ill with scarlet fever. It was the same illness that had killed his wife 4 years ago. The 4-mile walk to school was too much for his daughter to walk any longer. In order to get someone to come and teach her at home, George traveled to Nonnberg Abbey in Salzburg. Maria Augusta Kucera, age 21, was the woman they chose at the abbey. She was living at the abbey because of her personal health issues and had previously attended a teacher's college in Vienna. Before the girl formally became a nun, she was supposed to tutor her for about 10 months. As we all know, though, things didn't go as planned. In the end, Maria stayed a lot longer. Casting Julie Andrews as Maria in number 13. Screenwriter Ernest Lehman only had one actress in mind for the starring part of Maria when he began production on The Sound of Music, Julie Andrews. She was ideal for the role, in his opinion. However, when director Robert Wise joined the team, his initial thoughts were different. Grace Kelly, who had retired from performing to become the Princess of Monaco, and Shirley Jones, a well-known actress best recognized for her parts in musicals, were his top choices. But when Robert Wise watched some early footage of Julie Andrews' unreleased film, Mary Poppins, everything changed. He was immediately convinced, like Lehman, that Julie Andrews was the best choice for Maria because of her charisma, voice, and on-screen presence. At first, Andrews was a little apprehensive despite her desire in the position. As the stage version occasionally did, she didn't want the film to come across as overly romantic or unrealistic. However, Wise and Lehman both expressed her worries. They aimed to produce a narrative that seemed more authentic and true. Andrews felt more comfortable and chose to take the position as a result. For $225,000, a substantial sum of money at the time, she agreed to star in the movie with 20th Century Fox. In the end, hiring Julie Andrews turned out to be a great decision. In addition to becoming one of the most beloved performances in movie history, her portrayal of Maria was instrumental in creating the modern classic that is music. 12. Von Trapp was an affectionate dad. Captain George Von Trapp was much more caring and affectionate in real life than he was portrayed in the movie The Sound of Music. The way their father was portrayed as aloof, harsh, and frigid was one of the things that irritated the real Von Trapp kids. He did, in fact, use a whistle to call his children, and each one had a distinct sound that they would all recognize. He also outfitted them in sailor uniforms that matched. He didn't, however, force them to march around the home or form military formations like in the film. George Von Trapp was a loving and compassionate father, despite the fact that he occasionally seemed overburdened by his responsibilities. Author Tom Santopietro claims that Maria, the stepmother, was the one who actually needed to develop her emotional expression skills. Since she had grown up in a very rigid and chilly atmosphere, she found it difficult to express warmth and affection. In an interview with the BBC, the youngest child, Johannes Von Trapp, described his father as a really likable man who was accessible, kind, and not the rigid military dad portrayed in the film. The captain's portrayal in the movie was altered by his mother, Maria, to make him more like his real self, he added. However, regrettably, she was unable to convince the filmmakers. That is not the end of it. Take a look at what occurred next. Father Wozner was substituted in the film at number 11. One important character from the real Von Trapp family story was left out of the Sound of Music movie. When their bank failed during the 1930s Great Depression, the Von Trapps lost a significant amount of their fortune. They started leasing out rooms in their large house to earn money. Father Franz Wasner was a Catholic priest who rented the space. Father Wasner heard the family sing and realized they were quite talented. In his capacity as their musical director, he worked with them to improve their vocals. He gradually transformed them into a legitimate musical group, according to Maria von Trapp. His leadership helped the family become professional vocalists. Along with the von Trapps, Father Wasner even fled Austria and traveled around Europe and the US. Tom Santopietro, a writer, described him as the Trapp family singer's main musical inspiration. He was not, however, in the movie. Instead, to symbolize the guy who helped them with their music, they made up a persona called Max Detweiler. The directors thought that showing a priest as their music teacher would take attention away from Maria's persona. Father Wasner, therefore, was left out of the story. Maria, number 10, was described as peaceful. January 1905 saw the birth of Maria Augusta Kucera, who would go on to become Maria von Trapp. Her parents died when she was a little child, leaving her an orphan. After that, she was transferred to live with an allegedly violent and harsh uncle. As she became older, Maria went to a college for teachers. She subsequently converted to Catholicism after expanding her knowledge of religion throughout her stay there. She then enrolled in the Nunberg Abbey in Salzburg and started her nun training. Maria is described as kind, reserved, and quiet in The Sound of Music. In practice, though, she was lively and found it difficult to follow the rigorous convent regulations. Maria subsequently acknowledged that she caused a great deal of disturbance at the abbey. In an essay from 1980, she called herself horrible, the worst you can imagine. In addition to racing around the courtyard, destroying dishes, talking when she was supposed to be silent, and even going onto the convent's roof, she also whistled Gregorian chants, which are supposed to be solemn and revered. Therefore, although the movie portrayed her as serene and well-behaved, the real Maria was lively and occasionally a little mischievous. 9. Maria had doubts about getting married to Captain von Trapp. Maria wasn't really sure she wanted to wed Captain George von Trapp. They did get married in the film The Sound of Music, around a year after she arrived at his home as a nanny. They were married in 1927, however, more than 10 years before they officially departed Austria in 1938. Maria was considerably younger than George. It wasn't a romantic love tale when they first started dating, and he was 25 years older. He fell in love with her and wanted her to stay as his children's mother, not only as a governess. She agreed to stay with him and assumed that position when he asked her to. Later, Maria expressed her belief that George's careful word choice was a gift from God. She believed that she might have declined his direct proposal of marriage if he had just come out and asked. Maria was initially in love with him, but she chose not to wed him. She wanted to support and care for the kids, which is why she married him. Their genuine affection blossomed over time. And just when you think you've seen them all, the cinematographers missed one more detail. The Trapp family did not slip past the Mountainers, which brings us to number 8. Their departure was not as dramatic as it was portrayed in the movie The Sound of Music, even though the von Trapp family left Austria the day before the Nazis closed the borders. According to official documents and interviews held by the U.S. National Archives, their escape was actually rather orderly and quiet. In a 2003 interview with Opera News, Maria, the von Trapp's daughter, explained that, contrary to what the film suggests, they did not escape by scaling mountains while carrying bulky instruments and luggage. Rather, they departed during the day, rode the train, and pretended that they were simply traveling. They did tell people they were going to America to sing, she said, adding that they made it seem like nothing was wrong so no one would figure out they were fleeing. The family didn't go alone on their trip. Reverend Franz Wasner, their musical conductor, and Martha Zachbauer, their secretary, accompanied them. Max Detweiler, a fictional figure who remained in Austria, was portrayed in the movie as Reverend Wasner. But in practice, Wasner remained with the family and helped direct their musical endeavors. A vacation to Italy marked the beginning of their adventure. The fact that George von Trapp was born in an area that joined Italy in 1920 allowed him to become an Italian citizen. The family traveled from Italy to London before boarding a ship bound for the United States. After coming to America in the early 1940s, the von Trapps supported themselves by touring the nation as the Trapp family singers. They eventually made their home in Stowe, Vermont. They established a 27-room guesthouse in 1950, and it quickly gained popularity. The Trapp family lodge is still open today and has grown into a bigger, more contemporary establishment. It is still owned and run by the von Trapp family's heirs. The 7th point is that the von Trapp family was not as affluent as the film depicted them. The Von Trapp family is portrayed in the movie The Sound of Music as being extraordinarily affluent. Living in a beautiful home, having many servants, and having no financial problems. But in reality, things were very different for them. The Great Depression was a severe economic crisis that struck the world in the early 1930s. The Von Trapp family was not an exception to the widespread loss of savings and employment. When their bank failed, a significant amount of their fortune was gone. And they had lost their earlier level of prosperity. The majority of the family's employees had to be let go because they were unable to maintain their spacious home. They started renting out rooms to guests to help pay for expenditures. This was a significant departure from their former lifestyle. The Von Trapps also began thinking about singing as a viable source of revenue to supplement their income. Together as a family, they had always enjoyed singing. It was another else entirely to perform in front of an audience. The father, Captain George Von Trapp, did not like the concept. In a 1978 Washington Post article, his daughter Eleanor said that seeing her father's family perform nearly caused him pain. There was nothing snobbish about him, she explained. He only wished to protect and preserve his children's privacy. The family, however, needed the money, so they started playing at festivals and concerts. Fans loved their songs, and they became well known very fast. In 1936, they even won first place in a major Austrian music competition. This accomplishment paved the way for them to perform abroad, especially in the US, and helped launch their singing career. In order to start over and avoid the dangers of World War II, they would eventually move to America. The sixth number. The youngsters in the film were given incorrect names. The Von Trapp family in the movie The Sound of Music has 7 children, each with their own names and personalities. In actuality, though, their names, ages, and even the number of children varied. In 1926, Maria, the actual nun, was dispatched from her convent to help with a single child. Maria was the name of this child as well. She was the second oldest of Captain George Von Trapp's daughters. For years prior, her mother had died from scarlet fever, a deadly condition that she also suffered. She was unable to attend school full-time because she was still recuperating. As a result, Maria, the governess, was invited to teach her at home. Many folks are taken aback to learn that George's daughter actually had the same name as the lady he would later marry, Maria. However, the children's true names were not mentioned in the movie. All of their names, as well as some of their genders, were changed by the filmmakers to better fit the plot. The children of George's first marriage were Rupert, Agatha, Maria, Werner, Hedwig, Johanna, and Martina, in order of youngest to eldest. The film's eldest child is 16-year-old Liesel, who sings the popular song 16 Going on 17. Rupert, the eldest kid, was actually a man in his late 20s by the time the family departed Austria. He was a physician already. The fifth is that the Von Trapps were music lovers. Even before Maria joined their family, the Von Trapps were passionate about music. Their daily routine was heavily reliant on singing, and they were already a musical home. The family placed first at the Salzburg Music Festival in both the real-life account and the movie The Sound of Music. But the movie's depiction of the events is not exactly the same as the real ones. The movie portrays Captain George Von Trapp as a strict man who prohibits music in his house. He actually had the exact opposite attitude and was quite supportive of music. Before Maria came into the picture, he and his previous wife were music lovers who made sure their kids were exposed to music. Fourth, Von Trapp and Maria got married sooner than the film showed. The music played in the film. Maria and Captain George Von Trapp marry in 1938, just as the Nazis are beginning to take control of Austria. This gives the impression that their wedding is highly intense, as if they are rushing to be together before everything goes wrong. That portion of the movie, nevertheless, isn't true to reality. Maria and George Von Trapp were actually married on November 26, 1927, a long time ago. More than 10 years had passed before the Nazis even invaded Austria. George was 47 years old at the time, and Maria was only 22, indicating a large age difference. With the passage of time, Maria became close to George and all the children. Maria wrote that she fell deeply in love with George at first sight, and that's why she didn't marry him. Her desire to be with the children was instead motivated by her love for them. She developed stronger affections for George over time, and they eventually became lifelong partners. There was still no threat from the Nazis when they were married in 1927. Their union was unrelated to politics or war, and Hitler had not conquered Austria. After raising their first 3 children together, they went on to have 3 more children of their own. Austrian life did not become perilous until the late 1930s, many years later. George von Trapp strongly opposed the Nazis, and the family's security was at risk. At that point, they decided to depart from Austria. However, Maria and George were already over 10 years married at that point, and were now a solid, cohesive family. Here's another unexpected error you may have overlooked. Third, the film did not include all of the Von Trapp children. The Von Trapp family in the film The Sound of Music had 7 children. Although each child has a unique name and personality, they are not all alike to the real Von Trapp children. To keep the audience interested in the plot, the filmmakers renamed them and made new characters. The 7 kids in the movie were modeled after the real-life kids of Captain George Von Trapp and Agatha Whitehead, his first wife. George was a widower with 7 children following Agatha's death in 1922. Their true names were Werner, Hedwig, Johanna, Martina, Agatha, Rupert, and Maria Franziska. So, their real names are not Liesel, Friedrich, Louisa, and Gretel, as we see in the film. In order to better match the plot and add drama, humor, and heartfelt moments, the producers altered these names and characters. Following their 1927 marriage, Georg and Maria had 3 more children. The film does not feature these kids at all. Eleanor was born in 1931, Johannes was born in 1939, and Rosemarie was born in 1929. In the United States, Johannes was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. His birth occurred after the Von Trapp family had fled Austria and sought refuge in America. Probably because it was already telling a large story and needed to keep things simple for the purposes of time and storytelling, the film did not include these 3 younger children. The film might have been too long or too confusing with more kids. Therefore, the true Von Trapp family had 10 children, although The Sound of Music only has 7. George had 3 children with Maria and 7 from his first marriage. The second was Christopher Plummer's refusal to serve as captain. It was difficult to find someone to play Captain Von Trapp in The Sound of Music. Getting someone to play Maria was much simpler. The captain's part was open to a number of well-known performers, including Richard Burton, Yul Brynner, Sean Connery, and Bing Crosby. But the director of the movie, Robert Wise, was adamant about using Christopher Plummer for the role. He had witnessed Plummer's Broadway performances and was awestruck by his talent. In spite of this, Christopher Plummer was initially uninterested in the position. He rejected it more than once. He thought it might not fit him and didn't like the way the character was created. After a while, Robert Wise made the long journey to London to meet him in person. In their meeting, Wise discussed his ideas for the movie and the way he wanted the captain to be portrayed. Additionally, he promised Plummer that he could work with the screenwriter to improve the role and make him more interesting. Taking everything into account, Plummer ultimately chose to take the position. In order to obtain the rights to turn the music into a movie, 20th Century Fox had to pay $1,025,000 back in June 1960. The 2016 equivalent of that sum would be roughly $10,100,000. Additionally, 10% of the movie's earnings would go to the original creators. First of all, 20th Century Fox was on the verge of going bankrupt when music saved the day. In the early 1960s, the film studio 20th Century Fox was having severe financial problems. They had invested a great deal of money in the production of the movie Cleopatra. It was originally only expected to cost $2 million. However, the budget soared to more than $44 million because of numerous issues that arose during production. Cleopatra did earn some money at the box office, but not nearly enough to pay for the enormous costs. The studio was in danger of going bankrupt. The music then began to play. At first, Fox was unsure of the movie's likelihood of success. They were worried that people wouldn't be interested in musicals because they had recently lost part of their appeal. The Sound of Music, however, was a huge hit when it debuted in 1965. The plot, the beautiful music, and the outstanding performances by Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer were all adored by the audience. Because to its positive reviews, the movie became the highest-grossing one of 1965. It didn't stop there, though. By November 1966, it had surpassed Gone with the Wind, which had held the record for 24 years, to become the highest-grossing movie of all time. The remarkable success of The Sound of Music prevented 20th Century Fox from going bankrupt. The studio recovered and was spared bankruptcy thanks to the revenues it made. Not only did this heartwarming movie become a treasured classic, but it also saved a whole movie company from certain death. In addition to clicking the next video that appears on your screen, please like and subscribe if you liked this one.